Hello, 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 hello. It's good to see you. Say hello.
Welcome to the Huskies Hockey Podcast. This is Weldie sitting here with Andrew, about to recap a very fun weekend of hockey down in the Prairie Palace of Mankato. All right, I'll just cut to the chase. Where are you on your panic meter when it comes to the season? I don't know. I like to think I'm pretty level-headed about everything, but I don't have a lot of confidence after this last weekend. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I've been wrong before, and I'm fine
You
with
haven't.
being wrong.
I don't believe that.
I know it's hard to believe, but I've been wrong before. It's just not often that I'm so wrong so quickly.
Yeah.
Keep in mind that we're recording this in October of 2023. In the same month of October 2023, I predicted that this was a Penrose winning team that we're covering. 13 days ago, we recorded that episode. And that seems pretty off at this point. I'm not ready to wave the white flag, though. It's early, and there's still plenty of time to get the season turned around. It's just we're kind of getting late early here. You know what I mean? Like, we got to figure it out and kind of quick.
Yeah.
So as far as I'm panic, where my hand is hovering over it. And my expectations have definitely changed for this team. Going into this next weekend with Alaska, I don't think it's fair for us to assume that they're going to do anything more than a split. And even that might be optimistic. So there's still plenty of time. But we got to see something here that proves to us that it's going to eventually come. And I'm more and more skeptical the more games that we watch with this team. But I'm not giving up yet.
Oh no.
So
no. We'll be here every week. Nothing's going to change. But to have the expectations that we both did, and then just to kind of see these opening weekends, kind of the big thing that I want to also reiterate, whereas I'm probably on, I guess, a 5.5, 6 on my panic meter or whatnot. But the big thing here is that it's still incredibly early in their season. There's still a lot of weird results going around on, unpredicted or unpredictable results going around all of college hockey, a lot closer games than people have thought, which is overall good for the game. But at the same time, it's way too early to even speculate about the damage that this is going to cause for the team in these results, which again, with 2 overtime losses total, and these teams very well might finish 1-2 in the CCHA when it's all said and done. Is it likely? No, but they might. So it's not, but it might not be this huge pairwise thorn in the side that everyone or that people may kind of look at. It might look at in the outside, whereas if this result happens in January when it was mid to bottom of the CCHA, yeah, it sting a lot more. We don't know exactly how this is going to affect in the long run, which is kind of keeping my hopes up. But at the same time, I mean, this team hasn't found the offense. It hasn't found the zone pressure, and it's even the defense as well has been a little bit more lax, and Basse in general. I mean, that's turned into what I think has been a pretty big question mark. I don't know what the rules are of calling up a Hola, maybe getting her some time, because I mean, she hasn't allowed a goal all season, so it's worth a shot at this point. Although Posh did well in relief, but I don't know. Where do you want to start? You want to start? I guess I already gave my thoughts on the weekend as a whole. where weekend as a whole, like overall thoughts. Do you have anything, or do you just want to dive right into game one?
Yeah, no, I agree with what you're saying as far as we're not sure what exactly these first 2 weekends, how big of a hole it's created.
We don't know what they mean.
I agree with that.
Yet. We know what they are. We don't know what they mean.
Right. But more troubling for me is just this. These aren't. I mean, yes, there's only been one regulation loss among the 4 games, but we haven't quite. They haven't passed the eye test. Like they haven't really looked good in these games. It's not like they're just kind of losing hard luck games. And again, yes, 2 of them in overtime, 1-goal games, obviously. But aside from the first period against St. Thomas, the first game, and then they had a 2-0 lead on Friday against Mankato. I don't think they were playing great.
They had a 2-0 lead for about a minute and a half.
Right, and a lot of that was at that time when they got up 2-0. I was like, this Mankato team really isn't doing much for me. This is a team you probably should sweep, and then you blink, and really again from that point on, the weekend was pretty much dominated by Mankato. The Saturday game was fairly non-competitive, so I'm more concerned with the performance that we've seen so far, and especially disappointed because I don't really think the young players are to blame here. I mean, we saw like Warren Clark had another bad game, gave up bad defensive play to set up one of the goals on Friday, and I still think he's been overmatched. But Hall and Werner, Gross have been kind of pleasantly surprised by. It's really not the young guys; it's the older crew that's letting me down. I think it might be as much as what was the biggest question mark that we had. I mean, Basse aside, again, I'm not real high on him right now, but I think he can turn it around too. But we'll set that one aside. I think the biggest question mark we had was centers
down the middle.
Is it as easy as that we still haven't figured that out? We saw already some scrambling there, putting Barrett Hall in the center position, moving Ingram back to wing.
And putting Sahlquist out on the third line, I think. So
right, and we see a weekend where he is only average at faceoffs. I think he was exactly 50% on the weekend. We see the rest of his skills, or let's say lack thereof, sort of be exposed if he isn't dominating in the faceoff circle. So I was just thinking after the weekend, God, they miss Crookshank. Someone like that, where it's like a senior / grad player, experienced sort of playmaker. They just not even looking for a sniper or a scorer. I'm looking for someone who can kind of dictate the offense. They just don't have
some opportunities. And that's the thing is I'm just seeing a lack of opportunities. And even the opportunities we're getting, I'll jump out of my seat maybe once a period, and then it'll flub off Molinar's stick or something like that. Now, I feel bad saying Molinar's game because of the goal that he scored, but it's not exactly...
He actually had a decent weekend.
Yeah, exactly. It's not exactly that goal was a rocket. I think Tracy would like that one back. But at the same time, I remember there was that scrum when it was still, kind of close in that Saturday game where we had a chance up front, and I think one of the Mankato players lost their stick, or Tracy lost his stick. And, we had a good scrum there, but, we ended up not being able to convert on those chances. And like you said, like missing a Cronulla or a Crookshank or whatnot, like some of those people that can disrupt and kind of make those plays, that's sorely what we're lacking right now. And we have just zero sustained offensive pressure to really convert on those chances.
Yeah, and I'd like to think that we have the talent. I think that the talent is there. It's just, the second week in a row here, we're coming back with like a lack of chemistry or gelling. That might have explained like the first period and a half for Mankato. They just looked like a team that, that was the first real game that they had played as that group. But they seemed to find it, and they turned it around for a weekend in which they, won 2 games, albeit one in overtime. And maybe it's typical to expect a team like this to have a little bit of growing pains and to gel, but we saw, another one of their opponents kind of figure it out mid-game and make adjustments. We see a team like St. Thomas, who, again, I still think is more in the cute story realm rather than a serious threat. But we've seen them put up some good performances and at least look more cohesive than the Huskies have. So it's troubling. I mean, I think you mentioned this is the best defensive core in the conference. We saw Anhorn kind of be a little too risky or be a little too aggressive in the overtime.
I don't know.
Kind of a bad play in the neutral zone.
I don't know what's going on there. If he's just trying to do too much, but he's also making some bad penalties too that are a little bit more uncharacteristic. So I don't know.
Peart had another sort of weekend where I thought he was kind of a little slippery with the puck, turning it over at some times, and he took a couple penalties as well. Perhaps it's these guys who really kind of pride themselves on an offensive aspect of the game from the point. Perhaps they're kind of pressing because the offense isn't coming from the forwards. Perhaps they're kind of trying to do a little too much. But that's distressing. If we thought that was really the strength of this team, to have some leakage from the back end might be distressing. It's not to say that everyone has been poor. I think Reiner's has been solid this year. I think Wiley's been all right. I guess of the 3 units, we're thinking offense, defense, and goaltending. Defense still might be the strongest because there's more question marks with Basse. Seeing him get pulled in the Saturday game, I don't know if that was right after he bit on the wraparound for the second time on the weekend. Did that for the game winner on Friday, and then he was beat by that. I can't remember if it was the second or the third goal for Mankato on Saturday.
No,
I thought it was deserved to pull him, if only to try to swing momentum. And they did play well. Probably maybe the best sustained pressure they had, even counting the Friday game, was the last half of the second period after Mankato was up 3-0. Part of that's going to be because Mankato kind of stopped being as aggressive as they had been with 3-0 lead, but St. Cloud was able to at least pressure them to an extent that they hadn't before that point in the weekend. Still was a fruitless attempt. I mean, they were able to pitch 1 goal in late in the game with an extra attacker before Mankato salted the game away with a couple of extra attacker goals. But so even, needing to sort of find a spark of momentum by doing a goaltender change, I'm wondering what the health of James Gray is. Posh looked fine. I think it's hard to sort of gauge his performance based on mop-up work. I'd like to see him in a full game. I think we'll get a better idea of what he brings.
I think we're going to get him in a full game this next series as well against the last.
If not Gray, I assume that Gray is still hurt. I would have assumed coming into the year that Gray is above the depth chart of Posh, just based on the fact that he's a little older. But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. I would be surprised if Basse plays both games this weekend. I'll put it that way. No matter who we get in the other game. And it might be Posh/Gray in the Friday game, in the opener. And then maybe if they thrive, that they get the other start on Saturday. I don't think Basse definitely does not have this job on lockdown. And I don't think it's all his fault, but he was not impressive this weekend. That's for sure. And so searching for answers there. And I just bring it back to the offense. We saw a weekend where I thought the power play struggled, really since that first game against St. Thomas. Power play, they haven't scored, have they? I mean, they had the extra attacker goal, which I guess is a man advantage, but not a power play goal. But I mean, just struggling to set things up. And over this weekend, again, there was a couple of decent power play chances where they were able to get a couple of shots in one sequence, but nothing that was ever too threatening. I thought they made the weekend pretty easy on Alex Tracy, a goalie who I was surprised to see get both starts.
Yeah,
Mentioned Keenan
Rancier.
Rancier sort of was the guy towards the end of the year last year. That's who the Huskies saw in the playoff game in Fargo. And when I saw Tracy the first night, and then when I saw him the second night, I'm like, well, maybe Rancier is hurt, or maybe CHN is wrong and Rancier transferred to Wisconsin like everybody else did. But no, I saw him on the.
Woden is listening.
It wouldn't be his fault, but no, I saw him, suited up, and he's doing the doorman duties as backup goalie on the bench, and so it's like, and Tracy looked fine, but I got a little surprised that he got both games. I wouldn't call him like a backup, but just surprised that you weren't able to give him more pressure, as if he's going to be suddenly their starter. That's not a role that he's accustomed to at the college level. So disappointing that they just couldn't, especially Friday. Like, you have a 2-goal lead. I know it's the worst lead in hockey, but they had an opportunity there to really sort of kind of run with it and just kind of take control of that game. And I only do it for your benefit because I know you love that turn of phrase. But yeah, I don't know if you wanted to go with each of these games in depth. I don't know how much pain you want to re-inflict on yourself.
Let's do it. Let's just rip the Band-Aid off.
Sure.
Just quick clarification for game 2. The second goal was the wraparound goal. The third goal was the one where Clark kind of whiffed on the clearing attempt, and it was a 2-on-2 coming in. Clark had the chance. He decided to go for it, but what's his name was able to kind of just bring it back and was able to beat Basse high, which caused them to get pulled. Which, again, beating a 6-1 goaltender high, or I'm sorry,
I'm glad you brought that up.
6-6 goaltender high. It's his default is going down to his knees and just opens it up. Morton. I mean, it was a nice. And
he had a good weekend.
Yeah, I mean, it was a nice shot, but at the same time, it's like Clark had a chance to go ahead and clear it, didn't. I mean, it was a harmless play, and not to be able to capitalize and get the stop when you really needed it to try to stop that bleeding was frustrating.
Yeah, to bring it back to the Friday game, I mean, I got home maybe like a minute into the game, so I flipped it on.
You West Coast time zones, jeez, so weird. Waiting
for daylight savings time to kick in for you guys, because we don't observe daylight savings time, so it's doubly confusing. But the games will get an hour later for me, which is nice. It gives me a good buffer after I leave work. But so I flipped it on about a minute or two into the game, and I'm not good with numbers. So when I saw the St. Cloud goalie, and I couldn't even make out the number, but I'm like, oh, that must be Posh or something, because he looked small, like he was like hunched over. I'm like, oh yeah, who is that? Is that Gray? Is Gray healthy? But no, it was like Basse. I'm like, God, yeah, he just negates all of his size advantage by just doing this permanent crouch. And I know that's goalie 101 now, but it's frustrating because I don't see real the benefit in negating such a natural size advantage. But that's kind of how I picked the game up. Then I picked the game up with the Mankato announcers, and I remember this from a couple of years ago. Their announcer, they're just, and they're brought. I don't mind the Okabe, because we are no authorities when it comes to pronunciations of players.
Was it just the fact that it always stuck out so much, or did Okabe just always have the puck?
I was going to go. You're going to trip it up.
Default to Okabe. Maybe it's just I noticed it more because he just kept going with it. But I was like, maybe he just always had the puck, or he just never left the ice. I don't know. I mean,
yeah,
the score sheet,
but I would be able to accept that. It's a tough name, and sometimes the pronunciation guides that St. Cloud gives them isn't the best they're not. We've seen some of those pronunciation guides go awry as well in the past. So willing to forgive that. It's more like I think that it's like that play-by-play guy. It's like brought to you by Ambien. He's just boring. Like he kind of lulls you to sleep. He's got no real intensity at all, even for Mankato goals. Well, like he's just kind of fairly mild mannered.
I felt like it was just so monotone up until Mankato scored, and then it was like a huge spike up, and it was just like an electric shock of like, buddy, jeez. Where it's almost like you want to say calm down, which like you shouldn't, because,
but that's what.
But it's like you just have no excitement throughout the whole time until all of a sudden it just hits you with like electric shock paddles from any medical drama ever, where it's just all of a sudden you just and bam, and it's like, oh, geez.
Yeah. So I flipped it over the KVSC guys, and I was able to sync it up, and I enjoyed that much more than listening to the Ambien crew. On Saturday, though, I run into the same thing where the radio people are above, they're faster than the video feed. If it's the other way around, I can make do with that, but I can't pause KVSC on my phone, because if you pause it and you press play, it just recycles to whatever the most current live is. So I had to sit through the Okabees and the Meetinins and the boringness of the Mankato broadcasters for Saturday, which was disappointing. But so that was, and it reminded me of 2 years ago, when that's when I discovered Blake Tyson, KVSC group, because it was the same thing. It was that same boring Mankato announcer in Mankato, and I'm like, I need a change up. So shout out to Moose and Fern.
Friends of the show.
Your coverage. Friends of the show. I enjoyed your coverage much more than the.
I'll tell on myself. I did not listen to them. So I'm sorry, gang. But overall, were they critical? How? I guess I could just ask them. But what were kind of? Did you agree with their assessment of the game?
I mean, nothing is sticking out as far as like. It's a profession. It was a professional broadcast. Like, they're a little bit homerish, but they're not. They don't shy away from being critical as well. I don't think they weren't being like Andrew level critical, which I hope you aren't ever that level of critical. And you really shouldn't if you're covering that team. No one would stay tuned in. But yeah, I guess I can't even remember. I had a couple of drinks that night.
Oh, there you go. Well, it was needed.
I might kind of forget.
One thing that I thought,
and I wish I was able to listen to them on Saturday, but I wasn't because of the technical. They should be just like have a huge delay on KVSC. Put like a minute delay on KVSC. That way I'll always be able to, because I always run into this. It's like I would do it every game. I would simulcast their broadcast over Jim Rich, certainly, but I can't a lot of times because of this issue. So just slow it down.
Jim Rich would love to explain the overtime rules to you. So Friday's game, 38% on faceoffs. Faceoff, like you said, with Salquist, our faceoff stud, being average, middle of the road all weekend, but everyone else was abysmal. Ingram was terrible on Friday. Hall sliding over to center on Saturday. He was terrible on the draws. I don't know how much time that he's had at center, but all around, that was just hugely lacking. One thing that I found was interesting, though, I will give Mankato a lot of credit for. It really reminded me of actually the women's game against Mercyhurst, where they were able just to really get in front, plug up lanes, and block shots. Now, St. Cloud didn't, again, like in Mercyhurst, St. Cloud didn't do enough to change lanes and work hard enough to get shots through, and eventually just shot in frustration what it looked like, which obviously went right into the shin pads of the Mankato defender. But I do feel like this penalty kill that Mankato had will probably be one of the best in the country when it's all said and done. Because I do think that they were incredibly good in position, and we weren't able to really do anything on the power play. all weekend. And I think you can say that, it's a knock on St. Cloud's power play, but I think I'm going to actually give a little bit more credit to Mankato and their defense when it comes to that.
Yeah, that's fair. It's a lot of block shots. They were able to clog lanes, and a team like St. Cloud, which kind of, especially on the power play, sort of prefers to sort of keep it at the dots. Mietinen's office, we kind of think of. It's a winning formula to defend against that kind of power play. It's again where I kind of wish that there would sort of be a plan B there, kind of like getting back to their sort of trademark, the grease pan type goal.
And that's where like Fitzgerald.
Maybe that's easier said than done.
That's where Fitzgerald was so good, being down low and using that resource as well. And then obviously, we kind of get into that overtime. And we win the draw in overtime. We control. We had one really good instance, good chance that definitely was a pick that was set. It was interference, but at that, like I said, they're not going to call it an overtime, so you might as well run it. Fortunately, it doesn't go in, and then we're still able to control. But that's where they're getting so much coaching in 3-on-3 hockey, and it's just so much it's a slower game, just waiting for a mistake to pounce on. And I think again, Mankato incredibly well positioned, incredibly structured. Not allowing St. Cloud to get a lot of room. And I think Anhorn just got frustrated. So he tried to make a play, turn it over, and then all of a sudden there's a rush, and then you've got VT Mietinen back there. And on defense, that's never going to work out. In the end, goes on the wraparound, gets the game-winning goal, and it's over in one rush. Again, it's just, everyone knows our stance on 3-on-3 hockey, but it's clown hockey, and then that's just what we have now, and I understand that. Let the record show I've always had this thought, and not just bitter about the 2 overtime games, but the 2 overtime.
And maybe that's again. I'm trying to put on my idiotic optimist, the idiotic optimist hat. You do a sounder for that. But what if St. Cloud would have won the 2 overtime games? We'd be sitting at 3-1-0. Is it just the matter of a couple of bad shifts in clown hockey? What the perception would be in the fan base, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. I think people would still expect us to, though, that we should have handled St. Thomas better. St. Thomas gave the Gophers all they could handle in the Friday game. That was a back and forth affair. That was a lot of fun to watch. But at the same time, yeah, it's you got those couple of bounces. It's going to be, we might be singing just a little bit of a different tune. That's a good point.
And I remember saying this last year in the Miami series, the Miami home series, where they won 2 shootout games, thinking I would have rather have lost one of those shootouts, because sometimes losing can clarify weaknesses better than kind of like illusory wins, like these kind of cheap wins where they cover up, they sort of mask the fact that you didn't play a very good game. Oh, we won a shootout. And maybe that's the same thing. Like, if we're 1-3 here, we really are focusing on what we need to do to turn this around. Whereas that message might not have been easily come across if it's 2-2 or 3-1 based on some overtime luck or however you chalk it up.
Kind of like in D3 when the Mighty Ducks were up 9-0, and then in the third period they came back to tie 9-9, and Coach Riley said, I would have preferred we lost because you learn more from a loss.
That's exactly my point.
Yeah.
Riley and I see eye to eye. So I don't know. Obviously, I'd rather not be 1-3, but if it kicks you in the butt, and if it's an effective butt kick, then, like I said, there is plenty of time to turn this around. But
let's
1-1 hope that message gets across.
In the
no, it's 1-1, 0-2.
Here we go. So
to be accurate,
yeah, and then the second game, I saw the line changes. I was a little bit excited because I'm like, okay, this will jumpstart some players. I think, Salquist going down on the third line. You got Ingram back to wing on the fourth line. Open up some time, open up some space, better matchups. Just flat. I didn't think there was any type of urgency or any type of um just any type of spark like throughout the whole game. And then Basse gives up the first goal, which I can't remember, was that on the power play? I think it was, yeah, where I think Morton tried to center it. It gets deflected back to him, and then he shoots, and it's goal. Okay, fine, but that Olsen play, where it was that wraparound, and then Morton's second goal, where it should have been cleared. It was just like this. Clearly, it's just not our series. And even when Kupka scored with like 5 minutes left to go, I mean, I don't think I cheered. I was like, we're just kind of delaying the inevitable at this point. So it's, I thought Ingram was fairly invisible. I thought Kupka, had an all right. Like, I mean, if it wasn't for the goal, I didn't think he did very much in general. Like Clark, again, we're going to have some growing pains, and I have to keep telling me that, but I thought he had another rough weekend. Especially on that second goal, the game tying goal that Mankato scored, where it was that bank pass and let the defender get behind him like that. And it's like, can't do that in this league, and hopefully that's a learning situation for him. So it's a little bit of a frustrating weekend overall. I think Mankato is solid. I don't think I don't know. I don't know what to make of the CCHA. Overall, it's going to be it's going to be kind of an interesting year for all of that. But.
Yeah, that's very intriguing because Michigan Tech was the preseason favorite. They're winless through 3 games. Michigan or Northern Michigan had a winless weekend against Duluth. I think we got a question coming up about that one from our favorite Duluth fan. But they look like they can score goals. It don't look like it can stop any. And then you got these 2 teams that the Huskies have seen, Mankato and St. Thomas, who, again, I'm more sold on Mankato because they just have more of a track record. Even with the amount of players they lost, they still have guys like Morton, who I think is solid. Looks like they're decent in net. It looks like they're decent at defending, at least. You mentioned like power penalty kill. Again, I'm not sure. That doesn't look like a championship team to me, but the CCHA might be completely wide open. We saw again, Augustana's not technically in the conference because they're only playing a limited schedule, but 2-0 against Bowling Green.
Yeah.
So, and again, I'm not sure if those count in conference standings or not. I'm not sure if they do, but that league's completely up in the air.
I think one of those.
So
one hookup that weekend was Zemer from Tremblay, which was a former St. Cloud State player and commit that fizzled out. So.
Well, and see that winning goal they scored on Saturday. Yeah, because it was a Saturday-Sunday series, your favorite. But that winning goal, that crowd was into it. I mean, it's Augustana.
They're coming.
It's like they're not quite on the same par as St. Thomas in terms of like school, but in terms of like it might not take them too long to at least jump into legitimacy, especially with their building opening up this year. Yeah, they're well set up. I think if we're talking about a league where put those teams in the blender, we're not sure who's going to emerge as a first place contender. We got so many candidates. It might not take Augustana too long to sort of become competitive in that league either. But let's not get too far ahead of ourselves.
Well, it's like a slightly elevated Atlantic hockey when it comes to it. It's like you're going to have your bad teams in there. That's always going to be bad. But, you might draw a name out of the hat of the 4 teams. Who knows who's going to be good that year?
Yeah, like Atlantic Hockey's gonna they're always, I mean, with an asterisk, not always, but usually gonna get one bid in a league. You know, they've had the year where they had two,
And then they'll beat
but
St.
that's
Cloud.
gonna happen like once every 20 years. CCHA's got like they'll more regularly get two teams into the field, but it's just too early to gauge, and as a result, it's too early to gauge how freaked out we should be about St. Cloud.
So, I mean, we'll see what happens with Alaska. I mean, then I think maybe at that point, then, you know, we'll find a bridge. But up until, you know, we'll see. Do you, you know, I almost hate to kind of bring this up, but do you have a Powell for the weekend?
Yeah, we should always try, even in a weekend where it's difficult to come up with one. I had some candidates. I mean, Barrett Hall scores the first goal on Friday. Kind of nice little transition off of a turnover, a nice play and a nice shot from him. I did think he kind of struggled in as a center on Saturday, but again, that's kind of a position that he might be right. And I don't know how much expectations you should have for him in that role. But he's continuing to impress. He is not the problem. Like,
correct.
I'll say that. Yeah, just, you know, I thought guys like Litke was all right. I thought he was fine. You know, Molinar, he did score the other goal, and I did think he was okay. Well, you know, I have said Reiners has been solid this year. He did take a penalty on this Friday game, but he's not a guy that's gonna rack up points. But he's just a stay-at-home presence who I've been impressed with, not just early this year, but last year as well. Sort of emerged as just sort of a steady presence, and I'm rarely sort of cursing his name after an opponent's goal scored. So yeah, out of just an appreciation of his style, because you need guys like that. And I thought he had a decent weekend. I noticed his name positively, at least, throughout the weekend. So I'll say Mason Reiners.
Interesting. Go Huskies, woo. Said hard to pick anyone, but he did like Barrett Hall again, which is also my pick, just because he was really the only spark plug we had on offense all weekend. A little few and far between, but I've been incredibly impressed with him. Andor's bad penalties seem out of character. Love that Brett changed the lines. He feels like a lot of messages were sent by some of the shuffling that went on. So I hope, you know, I hope that lands if that's the case. They played better overall on Saturday. 2-goal outbursts though really did them in. They seem to have trouble passing to each other. A lot of passes in the skates, and I think it's, I mean, overall, a fairly young team just trying to get used to that. You know, we've got obviously some veteran leaders, but you know, we do have a handful of sophomores and freshmen. So, but I mean, I thought I'd see a little bit more out of Rogers. You know, he didn't really have much. You know, and just going on, who else even played? Rosborough played. Not much out of him. So, like, I think even the whole fourth line on Friday, especially, looked fairly invisible. So,
Ports has been underwhelming.
Yeah. Now, I don't even know what to expect from Ports coming in, but yeah, he's just been he's a jag, just another guy out there. So,
right.
Posh looked strong enough to start a game. In his opinion. So that was his thoughts on the series. So, I mean, yeah, that's pretty much all we can kind of say about it is just that, and we'll see what happens here up against Alaska, who is a team that, you know, desperately, I think St. Cloud needs to kind of get back on track, especially coming from home or back home. Now they did have, again, like we were talking about, how Michigan Tech was kind of the preseason odds-on favorite. Also my pick, odds-on favorite when it comes to the CCHA, and they go into Michigan Tech and take a 4-1 win off of them on Friday with 4 goals there on in the second period on Friday. Then Saturday able to get a 2-2 tie on them, and that's after handily getting swept by Denver. So it's like, so this is a team, if we want to stack ourselves up to Denver, we gotta match some of that intensity. I don't know if this team has it, and so far from what we've seen.
Yeah, it's very possible that Alaska is going to be the best team they've played so far. And this
Carl
is
Falk revenge
not
game
real.
right here.
There you go. Yeah, this isn't. I mentioned it last week. This isn't a gauntlet necessarily to start the season.
Mm-hmm.
You had St. Thomas, Mankato, Alaska. You get a week off after that, which hopefully they won't get swept that weekend. And then Miami for the conference opener, which you can't take those games for granted now either. But this isn't. These aren't world beaters that we're playing right off the bat here, and yeah, it's possible that Alaska, like I said, might be the best of the bunch. They might be the worst of the bunch. Who knows? Like 2 performances that either means Denver's otherworldly or Michigan Tech is overrated, or more likely somewhere in between there. Probably, I would imagine that Alaska stayed down stateside. They're probably in St. Cloud right now. I would assume they're not traveling back to Fairbanks from home.
I would imagine they're taking some Sloshman advice and going to the Chipotle, the best place to eat in town.
Seeing the St. Cloud fine dining at the Chipotle, maybe getting reservations for the whole team.
Maybe they're going down, seeing all the sites, hitting up gritty St. Cloud, maybe getting a tour, and getting maybe
lucky.
Yeah. Lucky. If they're not booked up, who knows? Maybe getting a good look at the dam.
I should reach out to them, actually. It's been a while. Thank you. I'm actually writing that down. Follow up with Bob. Okay. So, yeah, I mean, this was kind of a darling story last year with Alaska. Everyone's favorite independent team who it's not so far off from what we've seen this year, where they really didn't do very well against good teams, but took care of business against bad teams. Now, again, you could classify Michigan Tech as a good team. Those have probably been their best wins last year. Like if you would have looked at their schedule last year, they got swept at home against Michigan Tech last year. But I don't believe they won a game. They beat Denver in Denver, but then no other wins against any tournament qualifying teams. So, but a team that sort of racked up quantity of wins by playing a mostly independent schedule with Lindenwood and Long Island and teams of that caliber. I seriously do think that it's a team that St. Cloud needs to take seriously. I think they're going to present some challenges in terms of size and sort of a physicality.
And at this point, we got to take everybody seriously.
As I said at the beginning of the show, like we should maybe not set the bar too high than a split, and that win, if you're getting a split, might be a all-out battle based on how this team is performing so far. Who knows? Maybe we get out there on Friday and St. Cloud clicks and Alaska's got, Chipotle legs and it's no contest. I'd love to see it, but we almost need to be proven that until seeing otherwise. We need to sort of almost expect that we're still going to see a team like in St. Cloud that's struggling to find its identity. Once it clicks, I think that this team certainly has the pieces. It's just a matter of getting them together. And I think the big key for St. Cloud is finding some veteran leadership step up, and finding some way to be able to create tempo. create their own pace. Like I don't feel like they've really, outside of that early stretch of the first St. Thomas game, they've really kind of just been playing the other team's game. Yeah. And
which is
there a way that they can dictate play? That's surprising that it's come this far that we still haven't quite seen that yet. And the St. Thomas game was largely a byproduct of penalty trouble for St. Thomas and a power play that clicked then, at least on that night.
It's like I'm struggling to
so
find
can we
their
see,
identity.
Yeah.
Like we don't have an identity yet of what type of team we are.
Right. And it can't even just be a team that's, struggles to score on 5-on-5, but they're deadly on the power play, because that only lasted one game, really. Yeah. And so, and they're not really scoring much on 5-on-5 either. Just 3, if you're not counting the extra attacker goal that they scored on Saturday. And so, just not doing enough to produce offense and not doing enough to prevent goals, either from the defenseman
I've heard in
or
hockey
from
that's
the
a
goaltender.
Bad combination.
It's not the best
not the best
combination to win hockey games. So, let's see something. If you're saying I'm really trying to be lenient here, and that's not really necessarily my role on this show, is to be the lenient guy, but I'll finish with this with a little bit of that idiot optimism, as we mentioned earlier. I was doing a little research on last year and some of the better teams. So these are some tournament teams, and some of these are number 1 seeds in the tournament. Kind of slow starts out of the gate last year. BU started the year last year 2-3. Their first game of the year, they lost 9-2 at Michigan. They ended up making the Frozen Four. Quinnipiac started the year 2-1-2. That included a home tie to Long Island, the vaunted Sharks.
Quinnipiac had a scare this weekend too.
Did have a scare. Had to go to overtime to beat AIC, our
favorite
our
Bees.
favorite Atlantic hockey squad. Denver, they started 2-2. They got swept at UMass, a UMass team that ended up being below 500 for the year. As we mentioned before, the Western Michigan started their season with a bad loss at Anchorage. Michigan Tech, they won 2 of their first 5 games, included a loss at Ferris State, and then a series at home where they lost and tied to Bemidji State. These are all teams that made the tournament last year. Some of them were number 1 seeds in the field. Quinnipiac obviously won the whole thing. So, and maybe 1-3. That's not as good as any of these teams' starts. But as I said, the result was, it's kind of the difference was with overtime with 2 of the losses for St. Cloud. So, and we see with BU this year, coming into the year is the prohibitive number 1 favorite of the country. And God, look at this team barely beating Bentley last weekend, and then losing to a bad New Hampshire team this weekend, and then getting creamed at home against the U18s. And that game doesn't count, but still, just from a pride perspective, if you think that we're sort of a little down on the Huskies, imagine what the BU hockey podcast hosts are talking about tonight. So, they're not the only team to struggle out of the gates, and and it's not impossible for a team to struggle out of the gate and still right the ship. And we're 4 games into the season. Yes, these have been 4 ugly, ugly games. But there's still time.
North Dakota made like a coaching career out of
first
this.
halves.
First halves were always 500 or below before.
Right. So it's certainly possible. There's enough time. It's a matter of, do you got the talent? Do you have the capability of bringing that talent together in order to turn this around? I'm skeptical at best at that right now, but I'm not going to be idiotic enough to think that the season is over 4 games in either.
We'll see 6 games in after this weekend. How we feel, right? So,
if I'm not jumping off the ship now, maybe next week I'm getting in my wetsuit, and then
flippers on.
The weekend, the Miami series, then I might be climbing the ladder, so to speak, onto the gangplank.
Gotcha. just kind of we teased a couple of it around the nation. There was a lot of interesting results, fun results, a lot of fire wagon hockey, as they say. Moral of the story: when it's end, looking at the polls, Brown still one receiving vote. So on Brown watch, I'll get some kind of a a tone for that. But
Oh, sure.
yeah, we gotta have.
We got to at this point.
It's just.
And hey, they're staying consistent. Yep. That's all that we ask. Is you stay consistent.
So
we know they had a great week in practice last week, and that certainly didn't change.
I was going to tweet out too that I yearn for the day where there is one receiving vote for Brown in both the men's and the women's poll. Just to see if I can narrow down maybe that's the same voter in both polls. But unfortunately, no receiving votes in the women's poll for Brown. However, Brown is 2 games in, so like the women play early enough.
Really?
But it's just interesting that the men's they hold out for until the end of October, early November.
Well, that must be tied to the fact that the women's season starts 2 weeks earlier. Right?
Yes.
I always thought that Ivy's ended. They couldn't start. Maybe I thought it was October, but no, I see the men's team. Their first game is the 27th of October. So maybe it's like 3 weeks into the season they can't start. I don't know. It's a really stupid kind of antiquated rule that they self-impose on them. And I didn't realize that the whole start of the season, I always thought that was like October 1st for the men's season. That's when it could start. But it's all tied to, it's like 180 days prior to the national title game. That's why the first game of the season has to be a Saturday. So that's first weekend of the year always has to be a stupid Saturday, Sunday series. It's like, why? Like, can we just start with Friday and Saturday? Like, why does it all have to tie to your dumb rules?
Nope. We should start with a Tuesday game.
Makes sense.
And it should be like a Hall of Fame game or something like that. It should just be a random.
It should be.
In like some random barn in some stupid town that is nowhere associated with anything. Over a stupid trophy. Let's put a trophy attached to it.
You can tell the tenor of this podcast because we're saying it's just everything is dumb and stupid and idiotic and God, this stupid team that we got a stupid cover every dumb weekend.
I love stupid trophies and stupid bowl games or what. I'm a little bit sickos committee when it comes to that. So, but yeah, a lot of fun results overall. I mean, obviously our results were not great, but Augustana getting their sweep over Bowling Green, Michigan again. Powerhouse, and a lot of people picked them. They had a rough weekend over against UMass.
No, they did win. They smoked them on Friday,
but to come back and then lose, and 6-3 on Saturday.
And they had a 2-0 lead in that game. I was watching. That was kind of my secondary game for a bit. You gotta avoid early season UMass. Just mentioned it with Denver getting swept out there last year. Gotta watch out. It's a trap game. They got Mankato next. Actually, UMass goes to Mankato.
Everyone loved to get on the Merrimack train, and
it's not to be
there as Arizona State kind of took care of them. Then I talked a little bit about. St. Thomas and Minnesota. That was a fun game of hockey that went back and forth. That was at the X. I think they had like 9,000 or so people there. I think they sold out the lower bowl, or if not, it was close. But it was St. Thomas was 4-2 early in the third. So they had a chance to really kind of pull up the upset, but Minnesota was able to kind of claw their way back. Snuggerud had a heck of a weekend.
We saw a couple of, Penn State oddly took a week off from their yearly October cake diet of feasting on Atlantic hockey teams, and they actually swept a series in the North Country in New York with Clarkson and St. Lawrence. But the other Big Ten schools feasting on those same cupcakes tumbled a little bit. Notre Dame losing to RIT, them traveling to RIT for a single game series. It's questionable there. Michigan State went out to Air Force and split that series. 6-5 win for Air Force on Thursday. It's a Thursday-Friday series. Gotta love those. And then Michigan State came back to beat them on Friday, but 2 wins there for Atlantic Hockey over Big Ten teams. And then you had Lindenwood scrap and claw to come back against Ohio State on Saturday to salvage a tie out of the Buckeyes, scoring a late goal there in the third to tie it, and was able to stave them off in overtime. So Lindenwood kind of spoils Ohio State's weekend slightly. And it's just like you said, it's been very much a parody start to the season. Holy Cross sweeping a home and home with UConn. We saw the icebreaker. They're doing these. I see next year they've scheduled the icebreaker for Vegas. It'll be the first time they've actually done a true kind of icebreaker at one facility, because the last 2 years they've done these split icebreakers. Last year it was Air Force in Denver were the hosts. Yep. And then this year it was North Dakota and Bemidji splitting it. And we saw Bemidji somehow go to overtime with Wisconsin. Wisconsin put up like 60 shots, but then only could win in overtime against Bemidji. And then Wisconsin ends up getting shut out against North Dakota, who handily took care of Arby the night before. So a good start for North Dakota's season. Miami keeps chugging along with their early season sort of success with sweeping Canisius. They did that last year, though, too. And look how the rest of the year turned out for them. Western Michigan keeping it in the conference. They're only able to win and then tie against Ferris F and State. So, I mean, not the best result, but not the worst result either. And then we had, we mentioned it already, the Minnesota Duluth, Northern Michigan sort of Donnybrook. Lots and lots of goals. 5 goals each night for Northern Michigan, and they're winless on the weekend. 5-5 tie, and then an 8-5 loss for them. In a series I see was just littered with penalties and lots of power play goals and lots of complaining by Duluth fans for bad officiating. CC, nice weekend for them, sort of just kicking butt against Union. A couple of 4-goal wins there. So good start to their season. A team that we were kind of thinking, good goalie, but where's the offense going to come? And they put up 13 goals against an albeit kind of weak Union team. And they got Long Island this weekend. So looks like they're kind of feasting on the cupcakes early in the season too, but that might be a good recipe for them. A team that kind of a sexy pick to compete this year, even though I think we both had them at 7th. I think it's still a team that you should keep an eye on. It's a team right now that I wouldn't take for granted as far as St. Cloud. Like, let's watch out for them. You might be fighting for them for home ice when it all shakes out. So, yeah, like you said,
Omaha,
a lot of Omaha. Yep, they don't have the redux of
last year. Yeah,
a sweep at home against Niagara. They sweep them this year, and so
including
off to a better start.
I wanted to make some kind
and had a gut out a 2-1 win on Saturday.
I wanted to make some kind of dig at Minnesota Duluth being able to score, 13 goals on the weekend. But they were able to put up some goals here against Arizona State last year before really hitting a time when they only scored like 1 goal a game for the next 4 games after that, something along those lines. But yeah, you don't often see 8 next to a Minnesota Duluth score, over the past, however, since Saturdalin took over. Sandalin. Good Lord. Saturdalin. Am I going back to Bloomington Jefferson?
A career change I was unaware of. Jeff Saturdalin coaching the Bulldogs.
Yeah, there we go. I'll edit that out. It's okay. No. I made that change.
Yeah, you keep it in.
So, yeah. Let's anything else around, or should we switch over to the women? So we have something positive to say.
Yeah, I think that's it.
All right.
I know we had some questions. We can probably get more into those kind of topics later. But yeah, let's cover the
All right,
women.
perfect. Women were able to take care of Bemidji State with a 5-2 win on Friday, and then the 3-0 shutout on Saturday. I was able to go to the Saturday game, so I was in attendance for that one. Watched the 5-2 game. Now, obviously, on paper, you look at Bemidji, and that was a team where you should get 6 points. Even with, just kind of looking at, the rosters and where the teams are and everything along those lines, this is one's like, okay, we can't stumble. And, first 2 periods, it was a little bit dicey. End up being tied before the first 5 minutes of the third period. St. Cloud was just really kind of to take it over. Now, throughout the whole weekend, I thought St. Cloud outplayed Bemidji, but Bemidji was kind of still always able to hang around before St. Cloud was able to finally kind of turn it. Now, obviously, the big story coming out, or the big question mark, I should say, because obviously we don't have a lot of news going on about it. Just kind of on the injury front, Emma Gentry, who obviously is our best player, and was on the line chart for Friday's game, ended up getting scratched, somewhat similar to Anhorn last year, where all of a sudden it was just like, oh, she's not playing. So the Huskies were shorthanded. And then Taylor Lind also did not play in that Friday game. Taylor Lind was the extra forward on Saturday's game. Now, I tweeted out that she was firmly in the middle of the bench, right in between the forwards and the defensemen, which usually that means you're in no man's land there. You're probably not going to get a lot of time there. And I don't recall her stepping out on the ice at all. So, 2 of your best players there were out for the weekend and still able to take care of Bemidji. And, that kind of, bode well, I think, a little bit for me, considering how a little bit of a letdown there at Mercyhurst, even though you got the split, but you didn't get a lot of the goal scoring. But, seeing that we were able to take care of business against Bemidji while being shorthanded was a good sign there for the women's team.
I agree. Yeah, based on the fact that you played maybe with your 2 best players unavailable. Yeah, like you said, it was a little underwhelming there for a little bit. I mean, Bemidji gave them a good test. I thought their goalie Thompson played pretty well, kept them in the game. That Saturday game was pretty tight as well, and even like in a shot category, St. Cloud really wasn't able to pull away. But maybe that's what evens the game up against Bemidji State with St. Cloud, is the fact that their Gentry and Lind are unavailable. And yeah, we need to get some answers as far as what's going on there, because we got the Gophers coming up Tuesday, tomorrow, probably maybe today, depending on when this podcast is released. But it'll be your first big test, and we'll get to previewing it here in a little bit. But we just need a healthy team here. Like I will say though, with those players injured, I was able to sort of get a greater appreciation of some of the other players on this team. I thought Laura Zimmerman had a very good weekend, stepping up. Cece Bolby also had a nice weekend.
I think
a couple of goals on Saturday.
Bolby was my player of the weekend. I thought she was incredibly noticeable overall out on the ice. Transfer from Dartmouth. The joke was that it was. I just hope she's able to kind of stay academically eligible with the more workload of the rigorous studies at St. Cloud State coming from Dartmouth, whatever school that is. So, but yeah, I thought she had a great presence all weekend. I thought she was great. Alice Sorrell got got a goal as well. But I mean, these are young players that are kind of stepping up. I mean, Bolby, obviously grad transfer, but you're talking about Zimmerman, freshman, Sorrell, freshman. I thought Avery Farrell, sophomore, had a strong game as well.
Another one of the transfers.
From Franklin Pierce.
Franklin Pierce, terrible presidents. And then
anytime you could drop that, we need a sounder for Franklin Pierce apparently as well, right?
I actually I was curious. Do you want to guess what their actual nickname is?
Oh, please. I'm going to go with the Pincers.
It's not bad. It's
Pierce.
the Ravens. You got to just think of a bird. Okay. Generally, you want to guess like any sort of school nickname, just go with a bird. It's about 75% of the time it's going to be correct. But yeah, she's been good as well. I like Clara Himlarova. I think she gives a good physical presence, kind of a hard worker. I like that, her style of play as well. This was, we're mentioning all these transfers that they have. This was a reunion tour of sorts as well for Ella Anik and Taylor Larson from the Point. Both were playing for Bemidji last year. I've really been impressed with Anik so far this year.
Anik
didn't put up too many points last year with Bemidji.
7 points last year, 2 goals, 5 assists.
She's
6
almost matched
games,
that already.
1 goal, 5 assists. So she's been,
and even more than that, just kind of a you hear her name all through the broadcast. She's a very active puck handling, defender, and it's good to see them spread not only the offense around, but just the key kind of playmaking. And as you mentioned previously in the show, Sani Ahola, what else can you say? Another shutout, 3 starts,
3 shutouts.
And 3 shutouts. Can't really get any better than that. Again, we're talking Union and Bemidji State. Mercyhurst was decent, but not the best competition. Coming into this Tuesday game against this one-off against the Gophers.
They have been rotating JoJo and Ahola, so where do you go here? Do you keep...
I think you go with Ahola for this one. And maybe you can return to the tandem for the weekend. We play the Icebreaker up in Sacred Heart. But particularly, you just go with a hot hand. And because it's not a series, you don't have to worry. Like you're not going to be able to do the rotation in a 1 game, so you're not going to offend.
At least I hope one not. Of them. I don't want to see a rotation this game
by playing both.
Usually, if you see a rotation in a game, it's a bad thing. Now with Ahola, like you said, it's maybe not the best competition, but I think just the way she is just so poised and unflappable, like seeing her play goalie and seeing Basse play over the weekend is just completely 2 different styles of, just how calm and collected Ahola is, and nothing rattles her, and always in position and making the play. And it's, that it's like kind of an ace in the hole there. So that's kind of what I'm hoping, that we're going to kind of get that continued. But obviously with Minnesota, who's had nothing but coasting pretty much all season, they had swept RAT with a combined score of 8-1, and then St. Thomas here with a combined score of 12-0 after 2 back-to-back shutouts. This is a series here that, Gentry and Lind, you got to have these players available. And if they're not available, it's going to be a really tall task for the Huskies to be competitive in this game. Minnesota, just so incredibly deep, much like they always are. But it's...
Yeah, you'd like to think that, hey, we're beyond the era of Taylor Heisey, Grace Zumwinkle. They're both gone after last year. But they've got such a pipeline that they just kind of keep this moving, just kind of reload this year so far. And again, it's early, 4 games and 4 not really competitive games from their perspective. But Abby Murphy off to a good start with 11 points in 4 games.
Would you take that? I don't know. It's all right.
That'll play. So natural hat trick for Murphy in the first St. Thomas game as well. So, 50-point season last year, and that was kind of, as a role player, putting that in quotes, but you had kind of Heisey, one of the, I don't know, 5 best women's college hockey players of all time, maybe top 10 at least, I'd say. And Zumwinkle too, had a great career too. So, she can kind of ascend to maybe the star player for them this year. It's going to be a very difficult game. This is going to be at Ritter. So, road game here for the Huskies. Certainly, I mean, I've said Mercyhurst, they're decent. This is by far the biggest test that St. Cloud is going to face so far this year. And, we saw it last year. They were able to pick one off here against the Gophers in the Hall of Fame game. That was a neutral site game. Was it at the, was that at Andover, I believe it was? So not even any current college facility, but 4-1 win there where they looked, they looked very good. I think the Gophers kind of took that game off sort of mentally as well. Caught them at a good time. And it was one of those midweek games. These midweek games can sneak up on you. But it's going to be a huge test. And I'm just excited to see. I'm more just like, even if we have Lind and Gentry available, are they going to be at 100%? Probably not. And certainly if they don't play, that really starts to worry me because, okay, maybe these players aren't 100%, but you're kind of leaving them out because, as it turned out, you could beat Bemidji without those players. And this is kind of like a precaution that, we just want to have them at their healthiest rather than try to risk aggravating a minor injury into a major one. Well, if they don't play this game, then I'm wondering if it's more of a serious injury. And particularly if Gentry is going to be on the shelf here for any sort of extended period, that really sort of would put a crimp into my expectations. So their health is maybe the number one key is what I'm going to look for coming into this matchup. But if they are healthy, I'm not even asking, predicting or asking for a win here at Ritter. I mean, that's a tall order to say the least, but at least show me a bit of competitiveness against, an elite team that we haven't seen in many years past. And we even saw last year, we did have the one win again in the neutral site game. He played them fairly tight in 2 of the games. Yeah. And 4-2 and 2-1. And I remember watching that 2-1 game. And it was a tight one, close, tied 5 minutes to go in the third period before the winner. We shouldn't say too much about the second series, the second home and home. 2 losses by a combined 15 to rip score. And that's more the Gophers versus St. Cloud games that we were accustomed to for the 20 years prior to that. So, we really like what they see. I believe I saw this as the best start that the St. Cloud women's team has had to start the season, 5-1. But now we're playing the big girls, and we can see if we step up to the occasion. And maybe you don't win the game, but if it's a tight affair and you're competitive, I'm going to be most interested in that. But that it's going to come down to a lot of it. It's going to come down to what the line chart looks like, because if you're not at 100%, it's going to take a lot for this team to pull off a big upset. But let's cheer for it. And I like the other pieces around here. I like them better as supporting pieces rather than the main pieces. You know what I mean? It's always hard to just play without your top players. It's never an easy task. So this will be a fun one. It's going to be an interesting game to watch, and I am definitely looking forward to it. I kind of like the midweek games, watching the Friday game. It's I got the women's game as my secondary game on the iPad, men's game on the main screen. It's this one's in isolation, no other games going against it. So I can definitely put all my attention on it. So yeah, looking forward to that. But let's hope that we get these players, Gentry and Lynn, back. That's the biggest key, not just for this game, but going forward for the rest of the season.
I mean, they do these midweek games all the time on the East Coast. Why not, have that more of a staple here in the West, right?
And you can do it. It's just an hour drive in between these two schools, at least. So,
all right, questions. Dan Jacobson wants to know what is defense, and that's
what is defense?
And
come on, you go to defense. You should tell me what defense.
Satterdahl over there is
right. He took that vaunted. Everyone knows Bloomington Jefferson early '90s was well known for defense.
That's all they did was defense. So
it's a system school, and it's all the refs' fault anyway,
exactly.
Right?
So, yeah. Well, don't ask us because apparently St. Cloud not great at it either. So, which player's slow start has surprised you the most? So
top of my head, I'm going Okabe.
That's I was thinking Kupka was a little bit. Again, obviously the veterans. I didn't know what to expect from Ingram. So I don't know if it was a surprise because I thought it was a possibility he would start slow. But he definitely has. But I think Okabe and Kupka are kind of the main two that I'm thinking of. Obviously, I can't say Salquist because he's still in a slow start from his freshman year. But God, okay, now I'm playing up to it a little bit too much because I don't even hate Salquist at all. It's just I don't get the love affair from Brett. So,
yeah, with Okabe, it's like I said the first weekend I saw a little bit too many like dipsy doodles. I didn't even see that this weekend. Like I saw him just I really didn't see a ton out of him really, and I wouldn't have noticed him really at all if Mankato guy wasn't butchering his name every 5 seconds. But I mean, that's like I said, I've been mostly fine with the freshmen.
Yeah,
they're not going to tear up the score sheet, even though Barrett Hall might be your best player right now. But
I think he is.
Like you just you got to find some way, some leader. It's like they need a leader among the forwards. And there's like we had one with Fitzgerald and then Crookshank, like going back. I mean, even like Cranola last year too. But guys that settle into that fourth and now even fifth year roles, those are the guys that if not lead your team in offense from just on the stat sheet, but just in the locker room and just as a forward unit. I appreciate we need to start changing lines up a little bit, but we need to find something that clicks. And I think that kind of starts with who are your anchors. And I'm really kind of looking at the upperclassmen here as someone's got to step up in that group. I think that's the big X factor so far.
Why have we looked so non-aggressive so far? It's now Chris and I talked a little bit when it came to like the 3-on-3, and like that's kind of how like 3-on-3 has gotten, is just that more of the plotting and then just kind of waiting around, and usually sometimes even they'll come back out of the full zone to regroup and come back in. But overall, I have noticed that there has been a lot less of the defensemen jumping up into the play. When they do, I like it. And there were a couple times that I did see Peterton Anhorn do it. But overall, it's just it feels like we haven't had enough pressure to get the defense engaged. And I think I don't know if everyone's just kind of a little bit too timid, but I do wish we would be a little bit more aggressive and kind of see that a little bit more.
Yeah, I agree with that. As far as where that or why, yeah, I'm not really sure. I can't really answer that question. But yeah, and we have seen plays like, and again, how much do we feed in or take stock in overtime results? But there has been times where guys like Anhorn have been a little too aggressive, and so it's finding a fine balance. I don't have the right answer or solution to that, but yeah, we notice those kind of things or have those kind of questions when things aren't clicking. And yeah, this, as we mentioned prior to the year about how we're waxing poetic about how we love this defensive core, either from that aspect of it, jumping into the offense, or defending, kind of what the position's named after, haven't been blown away by either facet of that so far. And again, it's surprising with Anhorn. Like, again, I think it's maybe a combination of trying to do too much or put too much on his shoulders at some points in the game. But that's the surprising aspect, is just this. It's not the usual suspects that I'm thinking of as far as not getting any production out of it. It's the guys that I expected that are more sort of the disappointments. Maybe that's a recipe for optimism, because if anyone's going to turn their season around, it's going to be the guys that have had a track record of doing so at the college level, right?
Yeah.
Again, I'm using the idiot optimism hat here, but it's more likely that Zach Okabe is going to turn in and end up putting in a 35-point season than somehow magically thinking that Jack Rogers is going to do that, or Tyson Gross or something like that. So perhaps that is a thing to be optimistic about. I'm not sure, but grabbing at straws, that's all I can do at this point.
Yeah, that's very true. Do you expect a goalie tandem kind of going forward? Do you think Posh is going to start getting some more time, or should we go back to that?
Again, I think it's a wild card with James Gray. And I think doing like a 3-man tandem is much trickier than a 2-man tandem, obviously, with the 2 games a weekend detail. So I'm not sure I have no opinion really about Posh so far. I mean, he really wasn't tested all that much in that Mankato game. He looked fine, but I'm not going to use that as a basis to petition for him to get the starting job anytime soon. We gotta see what he does in a full 60 minutes. And same with Gray. Gray might be the better of him and Posh. He might be better than all 3 of them. We just don't know. And I don't know if there is still an injury concern with him. I think there obviously is, because I think he would have been the first guy off the bench in Mankato if he had been healthy. Again, just speculating there, but let's see what they both have. And I don't know how you play that. I don't think you want to completely abandon Basse. I mean, let's not forget he had a good year last year. I mean, it wasn't Hasek like, but he had, especially that first half of the year, he was arguably better than Castor.
We might have to go back and talk about who Dominic Hasek was to some of our younger listeners, because they're gonna.
It's true.
They're gonna be a little confused.
He was a goalie. He played hockey.
His spine was a slinky, actually, is how he played goalie. So,
yeah, he was a good goalie. So yeah, it's I mean, I'm not going to give up on Basse. He hasn't looked
Not great.
his sharpest. And, but I think you still got to cycle him in too. So this is one where that's why I'm not a coach. I don't know how to make these decisions because it's, you're dealing with egos, office politics here. Basse's the only guy on this roster that had any college experience prior to Saturday. So now all of a sudden he's buried on the bench like Keenan Rancier for Mankato. This thing, I don't think we have an Alex Tracy who's already got dozen games under his belt to throw the job
we'll
to.
see what he has. I don't know.
I'd like to see Gray though too, and so again, I think the schedule kind of works out okay. You're not starting the season right away playing the Denvers and the UNDs of the world, but you think you can be competitive in a series against Miami, for instance, coming up, where you can see what you got in net.
Yeah.
So I'm just looking forward. If it is going to be a long season, more of a rebuilding year, those are the kind of things that I look forward to in a rebuilding kind of season. We haven't had one of those in a while, which is fortunate about that. But if you remember that 1920 season, that was the first sort of big freshman influx and first kind of action we saw from guys like Haster. And a lot of that wasn't pretty, but they got that experience that year, which I think kind of steeled them, kind of made them, tougher, better players in the long run. And that group ends up making several tournaments in a row and a deep run at that in one of those years. So even if this is going to be more of a rebuilding year, there's still value in watching the development and seeing how these players emerge just from individual sort of positional battles within the team. So I'm still looking forward to however this season shakes out, because I think there are some talented players in this group and excited to see how it all sort of progresses.
Over under 15 wins for the Huskies team.
It's probably a pretty good over under.
I'm thinking over
at this point.
I think we're going to straighten the ship.
Really? So 1-3, you play 36 or 34 until the playoffs. Yeah, I mean, it's just so few games. 15. I'll say over.
Yeah, there we go.
I'll say over.
Biggest,
but I think it's a good over under. Like, it's not like a slam dunk, which would have been 13 days ago. It would have been a slam dunk.
Biggest surprise so far.
Like,
I don't know.
Negative or positive?
Sure.
Or
Ben says biggest surprises so far. Maybe one negative, one positive. I
mentioned Okabe. I would have thought Okabe is going to be your leading point scorer this year, and that's not been the case. He's probably my negative surprise. What about? We'll start with the negatives and then we'll end on the positive.
My negative so far is Basse.
And that's another
and then my positive has been Barrett Hall. I mean, I know I've been saying his name.
I would say that, and I did wax poetic about Werner Miettinen last week, and I'll throw that out there as well.
And really, if we want to go all of St. Cloud, I can go CC Bolby as a big surprise as well.
It's a good one too, and I mean, Ahull has done this for a couple of years, but
like you said, Anik
3 straight shutouts.
Anik going from
Anik's been a good one. Yeah.
Going from 7 points, like you said, we talked about all last year with Bemidji to 6 points so far this season.
Which I think 5 of them were in the Union Series, so let's not get so far ahead of ourselves.
Nope.
But
I am.
That's those are good picks.
So
And I'm trying to, grow. I've liked sort of the freshmen. I mean, other than Clark, I think they've all sort of brought something to the table, at least from the men's side. And so those are some good surprises. I think, again, I think they've got the talent. It's just, it might be a little too raw, but there's a chance that they can bring it together too.
And then our last one, why wasn't an upperclassman center brought through via the transfer portal? And
wouldn't it be great if there was a Crookshank, right, picking on the apple tree every year? It'd be nice to have that. I mean,
Larson had to have known that was going to be a weakness.
Well, if he would have known that, then he probably should have been a little bit more
aggressive at it,
active. I mean, settling for Nick Ports, even at the time, kind of seemed underwhelming. And again, how it's not always that easy, obviously, but and there is some like politicking, and you're talking like grad students. Some of that might be like, what academic program do you offer? I think it is very similar to recruiting. I think it is a little different, though. I think there's some different dynamics at play. You're only bringing a guy in for 1 year in a lot of cases. There are the traditional transfers that can be there for multiple years, but at least with the Crookshank situation, that was a grad transfer for 1 season and 1 season only. So if you're trying to get a guy just with 1 year to go, there's going to be different dynamics there from bringing in a guy fresh for 4 years. So, yeah, and there's just not always going to be that sort of perfect fit available. I'm sure there was plenty of centers available, but how many of them were ever legitimately on St. Cloud's radar versus was he active? Was he trying to get these guys and just lost out on some
and
teams?
Who knows if they would have been better anyway. So,
right? I mean, that was the thing about Crookshank too. I remember at that time saying, this seems, I mean, it was kind of like an obvious, like he had almost made the choice the year before he went to the Gophers, but he was a guy that I don't think had ever put up a 20-point season prior to coming to the Huskies. So it's not like we knew right away, oh, he's going to be a 40-point scorer and he's going to be like one of the team MVPs. And it just kind of developed that way. And we kind of figure that out very quickly in the season. You're not going to hit those kind of home runs every year. Last year, they hit it perfectly because they got Anhorn, they got Crookshank, and then got Basse, who was, if you at least just look at his stats, was very good last year, especially in a transfer situation. It's lucky if you're going to hit 3 of those home runs in a 5-year time period, much less 1 season. So perhaps that spoiled us a little bit to the fact that the transfer portal can just produce these home runs every single season. But yeah, I mean, I'm not going to blame him because I don't know exactly what the dynamics were. And we don't know if he did try his damnedest and just, fell short based on conditions out of his control. But I'm sure he's punching himself too. Like, yeah, it would have been nice to pick up a Crookshank this year. Like, it's always nice to have guys like that.
If only that was just bring so easy.
This isn't the NHL. It's not like it's actual free agency with salary caps and everyone's kind of got equal footing. And this is a team, by the way, I wanted to bring this up last week, but I think it was the women's, or maybe it was the one men's home game, but they mentioned the reason, because we saw again the women's team playing at home in the black uniforms. And I believe it was the men's game that said that the reason, and the men's team also played the black uniforms. And the reason is that they ordered the white uniforms for this year, but they haven't showed up yet, which is like a totally St. Cloud State story. Like, we ordered the uniforms, but I don't know, we forgot to pay shipping, and they're showing up late. I mean, you're talking, you made a Mighty Ducks reference. I guess we should be, based on St. Cloud's financial situation, we should be pleased that they don't look like the Mighty Ducks at the beginning of the first movie where they were all in different uniforms and one of them's wearing like a football helmet. Like, we should be pleased that they at least have some uniforms to wear. But that's why they weren't wearing white, if you were curious, is that this year's jerseys with all the nameplates are still at the shop waiting. They're on the back of a truck somewhere in Idaho. And they're still on the way to St. Cloud.
We're probably still dealing with supply chain issues. So that's probably what the big hang up is. It's actually in a boat overseas still trying to get cleared. So it's sitting in the Pacific right now.
Yes, but I mean, this should illustrate this is not a university flush with resources. So when we're complaining about not picking off our 50-point Hobie Baker candidate out of the transfer portal, keep that in mind.
That about does it. Andrew and I actually will probably be back in a couple of days. Actually, we'll probably recap the women's game and then preview the women's tournament. What do they got? Is it the Icebreaker?
It's the Icebreaker.
So, against who do they got? They got another solid test against Northeastern.
Husky and Husky matchup, and then a team that they'll likely smoke, either Sacred Heart or Lindenwood. So. But yeah, we want to recap the Gopher game in full, and then also give a decent preview for the Icebreaker coming up. We got a new streaming service to tell you about that I found out about this weekend. They're not playing on Flow Sports, as it turns out, but it's a free service, so you don't yet got to pay for it. So I'll give you all those details on either Wednesday or Thursday. Sometime, so they play on Tuesday, and we'll probably jump on either the next day. But before Friday, we'll be back.
We'll be back
for mini pod.
So. All right, till next time, go Huskies. Woo!